Yeah, so it's fantastic to speak to you today. It'd be great to start off to know a bit more about your role and how it was going before the pandemic and how it then changed.
Thanks, Michael. So I've been the chief executive for Turn2us for coming up for 2.5 years. I've been the chief exec for a year, and as many people will tell you, the first year of a new chief exec job can be pretty intense. And we were kind of refining the purpose of the organization. So we've concluded that actually what we really want to do is to support people by offering really high quality information and direct support in the form of individual grants to people when they face a life-changing event that's got a financial shock. Now, that was pretty prescient because COVID ended up being a huge financial shock for millions of people across the UK, as you know, a lot of people went on furlough and lost a fifth of their income. And for people on lower incomes, that was the fifth that might be able to buy a Christmas present or even a meal out. So we've seen lots of people experience pretty sudden experiences of very severe financial shocks. And so the last year and a half has been very intense, and we offer benefit calculations on our benefit calculator, and we supported something like 250,000 people last year to claim an additional 1.2 billion pounds worth of benefits that they would not have claimed otherwise. We made about 4 million pounds worth of grants directly to families and individuals who had experienced shocks as a result of COVID. And we also have another few tools. One is a search tool to help people find grants that other individual grant makers make. And we have a lot of very high quality information on our website that 8.8 million people used in the last year as well. Mm-hmm. So we saw very quickly at the beginning of the first lockdown a very, very steep increase in uses of our information. We went from 5,000 normal benefit calculations a day to 50,000 a day. We had to buy extra server space to be able to manage the traffic. And we saw a pretty significant increase in requests for the grants that we make. And so we launched a new COVID grant of getting £500 into people's bank accounts really quickly. I think the quickest we managed was a 3-hour gap between the application and making the grant, but normally within about 10 days. So it was a very, very intense period, and I have to be deeply grateful to not only the staff with whom I get to have the pleasure of being a colleague, but also the people who are experiencing those financial hardships helped us to dramatically improve the design, the delivery, and indeed the evaluation of our work, so that we know that we can improve the impact of our work. So we work with a lot of people with that lived experience of financial hardship, who we call co-production partners, in redesigning our work to achieve better impact.
And in terms of what are the types of hardships that people can be experiencing, and did you notice a shift in that as the pandemic first hit and then has evolved over the kind of months?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of ways of talking about that. So normally a financial shock tends to have one or both of two kind of experiences. One is a sudden decrease in income or a sudden increase in cost. So if you imagine the disablement of the main breadwinner in a house, for example, suddenly you've got a lot more costs in order to make the house more navigable and accessible, but you've also probably received a significant decrease in income. So those are things. It could be the birth of a third child, it could be redundancy, it could be bereavement, it could be serious illness. So many things create, so many life-changing events create those financial shocks. I think what we saw during COVID, and this is a slightly different answer to your question, was that there were a lot of people who were experiencing the storm in a much more severe way. So we were all in the same storm, but we were in different boats, right? So we noticed that I thought a little over 50% of kind of white families had experienced a drop in income, but that compared to 88% of Bangladeshi families. And that's probably because of the way in which the economy works. So I work in a charity as a full-time employee, and when I'm sick, that charity will pay my sick leave and gives me holiday leave. But people who are on 0-hour contracts, who are Uber drivers, who cannot rely on their employer for paying that. So we think about them as kind of being in the secondary economy. And so a lot of people who experience very severe social barriers in life, whether it be racism or sexism or disablism, often experience concomitant kind of economic barriers alongside that. So we saw a really, there were a lot of research that showed the very disproportionate unfairness. The veil of respectability was ripped hard away during COVID. So we saw that a lot more. But there's been a kind of a really striking kind of disparity around wealth as well. So this isn't so much about income. So a lot of people who haven't been going on holidays, who haven't been going to restaurants or theatres or using cabs, have ended up securing quite a lot more savings. So we've seen something like 190 billion pounds worth of additional savings compared to the previous time last year. But we've also seen a huge increase in people running into debt. And our own research shows that a huge number of people are running out of money every month now, because furlough, kind of the 4/5 of income, doesn't cover it. And associated with that, we've seen nearly half, 44% of people experiencing very severe distress and anxiety as a result of that as well. So it's a very unequal distribution of the impact of COVID. So it's really helpful to kind of think about, we're all in the same storm, but some of us are not in the same boat at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I saw you speaking at an event, and I think you said, I've written this down to try and get it right, that more than 1 in 5 of us are running out of money always or most of the time. And I think that is it around 11 million people in the UK, and additional, over 4 million people in the past year. Which is just it's shocking to think about that, really, in terms of the effect that it's had.
Yes, and it's also compounded that, since the 2008 crash, what we've seen is that wages have stagnated. And so people who relied on income rather than wealth have had a material kind of deterioration in terms of their standard of living. But people who have property, I own my own house. Well, actually, the mortgage company owns a good chunk of it, but I've got a bit of it. And people who have kind of shares and things have seen their wealth grow dramatically in the last 10 years. So whilst benefits payments have been suppressed, wages have been suppressed, and people who rely on that kind of income have seen a deterioration in their lives. So, and then on top of that, there's an additional 4 million people running into debt as a result of the last year. So you can really see the kind of the divergence of quality of life in the UK.
Mm-hmm. And then in terms of, I think you spoke about the fact that in terms of going into poverty, that if you have a disability, if you're a female, if you're from a Black, Asian and minority community, then you're much more likely to be affected as well.
That's right. Yeah. So if you are already minoritized by the kind of the majority society, you are going to experience a higher incidence of financial exclusion. And there's just data to support that very, very robustly, as we've seen over the last year. It's been covered very well. Sorry, one moment while sorry.
Yeah, of course.
Sorry, that was my husband coming home, and our dog's getting excited by the
Yeah, I thought there's something exciting happening.
Yeah, which doesn't happen for them often in these days, but that's sitting around. So and the people that we have seen most affected are Black and Asian and other minoritized communities, basically on the color of their skin. Certainly, disabled people have had people who identify as disabled have had a much more severe impact of COVID, and then women. That's the other striking thing, is particularly single mums, more than single dads. So who have had to try and navigate flexible working whilst caring, and so are more likely to be on flexible contracts. And those flexible contracts have been the easiest to kind of pull out from under your feet by employers. The other group that we've seen very much more recently, and there was a very good bit of information from the Resolution Foundation, is that as people are being brought off furlough quite quickly at the moment, that's going well. But people who are being left on furlough and therefore are more likely to be made redundant at the end of furlough are those at the ends of their careers, so tend to be older people. And there has been, helpfully, an encouraging pickup in the employment of younger people who were very badly affected during the original lockdown. But there are some concerns about people towards the end of their career. Yeah.
And in terms of with the support from government and other types of authorities, how do you think the response has been in terms of financial support, and what more could be done?
Yeah, listen, I think the speed with which our government responded in terms of, providing the furlough scheme and the self-employment support scheme was good. But the complexity of our labour market made it next to impossible for anyone, our government or other people, to design the perfect system. And of course, a lot of people fell through the net. People who had, for example, only set up their self-employment in the previous year didn't get any self-employment scheme, any support. So I think generally a really great start. The £20 uplift to the universal credit was really, really badly needed, because, as I described earlier, that the benefits have not increased with inflation over the last 10 years. People on legacy benefits, the benefits that aren't universal credit, that have been around a lot longer, and lots of people are moving on to universal credit, did not get that £20 uplift. And so those people on legacy benefits did not experience that. We are very concerned about the potential end to that £20 uplift, particularly what we know about what's happened to incomes over the last 10 years. And we're expecting something like an extra 250,000 children to end up in severe financial hardship as a result of the end of that £20. £20 may not seem like a lot to many people, but if it's that top bit of money, that it means that you can go to the supermarket instead of the food bank, you can begin to see how £20 in 1 week makes a huge amount of difference. And we must be deeply concerned that as the fifth wealthiest country in the world, that 14.5 million of us, 20% of us, don't have enough money to get by on. And the huge increases of numbers of people going to food banks for food, for basic requirements, is unacceptable. And that profoundly erodes people's dignity. And that is not acceptable, really, in our society. And the challenge for particularly parents, but anyone experiencing financial hardship, is that it is exhausting. Okay, and so trying to work out, how do I get food on the table tonight? That's all you're going to be thinking about. You're not going to be able to be thinking about, well as kind of trying to work out this immediate and very pressing problem, I'm also going to work out how I can apply for that job and also sort out, can I get a better deal on my utilities? It's that, and we know that. I don't know if anyone, if you've been given a deadline for work, you just stop looking at your emails, you put your phone aside. All you're doing is doing that one thing because you've got to deliver that by a certain point. And that's the same kind of stress. It's called tunneling, that we go into when we need to do something as pressing as get food on the table tonight. And we also know that when we're under that level of stress, we have got less kind of self-control, and that's true for everyone. And when we're under stress at work, for example, faced with a chocolate and apple, we're likely to go for chocolate. Because that is, I'm not thinking about my health right now, I just need this. And so we can see people lose kind of self-control or executive control, and that people tunnel when they're under stress. And if you're under that prolonged stress for a very long time, it has a very bad effect on our cortisol levels in our bodies, and that can affect our physical and mental health too. So it's not surprising for us that when there are so many people going into debt, that we've seen 44% of those people experiencing severe anxiety.
And in terms of people who are, for people who have family members or friends or loved ones who they think may be struggling, is there a best way for them to be able to support them?
Yeah, sure. Talk about it, right? There's this discourse, not so badly in Scotland, I have to say. Scotland is a bit better, but in a lot of the UK, there's this discourse that if you're poor, it's your fault. It's because you're lazy and you don't know how to manage budgets. It's just not true. It's not true. And we know that because if it was just about people being lazy, then it wouldn't be a disproportionate number of people who are black or minoritized ethnic communities. It wouldn't be a disproportionate number of women. It wouldn't be a disproportionate number of disabled people. And it wouldn't be 20% of us. So clearly it's systemic. And so we should stop, feeling like it's our fault that we haven't got enough money, and we should stop judging other people for it. So talk about it, because that will immediately make it easier. And secondly, recommend people come to turn2us.org.uk and look at our benefits calculator. You may well be eligible for more benefits than you're getting. And the moment that you lose your employment, start claiming benefits. There's a 5-week delay until you get your first benefits payment. Don't think, I'm not going to apply, I'm going to get another job. Apply today, and go and use our benefits calculator to work out how much you can get. So that, because we should be proud of our benefit system. If I broke my ankle and I'd go to A&E, I would be, bloody relieved that the A&E department could help me with my broken ankle. But I would also be proud that I'm part of a country that has, free at the point of access healthcare. Why are we not equally proud that when I lose my job, that there is also, a brilliant benefit system that stops me from falling into deep poverty and penury? I should be proud to live in a country that cares about people's ability to buy food. So we should be proud of our benefit system instead of ashamed of it.
And in terms of looking at the past, 16 months now, has there been anything that's surprised you in a positive way, and how people have supported each other during the pandemic?
I think a couple of things. One is, we have, most of us had to suddenly become much more local, right? We're staying on our streets or in our local areas, and we've come to know our neighbours in a better way. It's a good thing. It's nice to know that, and we are certainly being more helpful to one another and less judgmental. I think that is good. I think the other thing is that so many people have suddenly had to use our benefit system that they are beginning to change that perception that people who claim benefits are lazy. This can happen to most of us, actually. So a financial shock can happen to all of us. And so we should stop judging one another and instead be supporting each other to thrive and have wonderful lives in one of the richest countries in the world.
And with that in mind, what would you say, from this point onwards, what's your main kind of hopes and concerns?
So one hope is that we listen to people who've experienced financial hardship instead of judging them, and that we redesign our social security system, and we build a more inclusive economy so that we haven't got a kind of primary and a secondary economy, and that we really, I often think that this is that, there are so many people who are being prevented from being able to contribute their insight, talent and potential to our society and to our economy. Wouldn't it be amazing if we were all being able to do that with as much ease as someone who went to Eton and Oxford? That would be great. And then we'd have quite an amazing country, I think. So even more amazing than it is now. So I hope that we have a more inclusive economy, and that we have a benefit system that is easier to use and less judgmental.
And then finally, for those who are wanting to support Turn2us, what can they do?
Please come to our website and make a donation. We make donations and grants to families, and we've got really strong evidence that takes that family out of a financial crisis really swiftly. So even 3 months later, they're no longer in a financial crisis compared to those to whom we don't offer support. So please do come and support our work. That would be great.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Michael.
Is there anything else that you'd like to speak about, or?
Not that comes to mind off the top of my head, no.
Brilliant. Well, I'll stop recording right now then. I'd probably say very loudly that stop recording.